let's get started. Did you copy that, Maji? Please confirm if we are ready. I'm ready to start, Maji. Okay, thanks a lot. Colleagues, thank you so much. Welcome to the Leadership Game with me, Pat Mazibuko. A special welcome to our guest speaker for the day, Prof. McDombela, and our esteemed panelists. I also want to welcome our TLD community that are connecting live via Facebook and YouTube. Thank you so much. And most importantly, our regulars and also those that are new. Colleagues, I'm very excited, but I always say to everyone else that I am not a leadership guru at all. I'm just a passionate and a permanent leadership student. I also want to impress that, colleagues, that it's very much important for us to understand that none of us are gurus in this space, but as long as we've got a passion and regarding ourselves as a permanent leadership student, that's the way to go. I just want to steal from John F. Kennedy, one of the former USA president, and this is what he said, quote unquote, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. And I love that, colleagues. So these sessions are about learning, these sessions are about leadership, and that is what we are doing. And for me, colleagues, I have coined a quote that says, you must be intentional in your leadership approach in order to be effective. Again, quote unquote, you must be intentional in your leadership approach in order to be effective. So colleagues, today's theme is storytelling. So some of you may wonder, why storytelling? You know, for me and my generation, colleagues, storytelling helps us discern between right and what looks right in times of leadership troubles. Let me repeat that again, colleagues. For me, colleagues, storytelling helped me, and it continues to help me discern between what looks right and what is right in terms of leadership trouble. I am of the view that our country is troubled and it's clear and firm leadership. The second reason, colleagues, why we're going for storytelling, it's because one of the most sought after leadership skill is listening with the heart. And now, colleagues, today we've got leaders that when you engage, they just listen to you, but they're not listening to you. So one of the most sought out leadership skills is listening with the heart. That being said, colleagues, allow me to basically issue one of my quotes that I've developed, and it goes like this, quote unquote. I personally maintain that leadership is a game, but not all of us are invited simply because some of us cannot play and some of us won't play. Let me repeat this again. I personally maintain that leadership is a game, but not all of us are invited simply because some of us can't play and some of us won't play. That being said, hearty welcome to the leadership game today. Maji, may I just hand over to you now to do what you do best in terms of the welcome and running the PowerPoint. Over to you, Maji. Before we do that, colleagues, may I ask that all of us and also keep our videos off. It's only when we talk that we'll do that. Thanks. Thank you so much, much appreciated. Again, I want to take this moment and welcome everybody. The theme for today is storytelling. And like I said, colleagues, why storytelling? It's simply because, amongst other things, it helped me to discern between what is right and what looks right. And I think it's one of the tools in the leadership troubles that we're experiencing. That being said, fellow colleagues, let me introduce our guest speaker. I will say something, if I were to say, and I'm going to ask him to add on what I'm going to say. I know him as a brother and a good friend, but he is Professor Mek Tombela. He is the principal of Management College of Southern Africa, a very detailed person, but a very friendly person, a man of God, a very easy person to be, and a very helpful person in terms of trouble, a very needy person indeed. May I therefore take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, as members of the community of the TLT, just to introduce to you our guest speaker today, Professor Mek Tombela. Over to you, Prof. Thanks. May I then ask colleagues that all of us just switch off our cameras and mute and listen attentively. Thanks a lot. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Pat. You've said quite a bit, both about storytelling and about me. First of all, let me just greet all the colleagues, friends, and leaders who are here today. And I don't know if I'm too dark.
No, it's all okay. It's all okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
You may proceed.
It's all okay.
Lovely.
Okay, thank you. I was going to do a PowerPoint, but I've changed my mind. But later on, I will share some short video to illustrate a particular point. So I hope that I'm not going to be too boring talking whilst people are listening. But just to echo a few things that Dr. Mazibuko has said, I thank him for inviting me to speak at this gathering. When I got the request, I did my best to try and turn it down because I felt that I'm an expert in this field. He quickly reminded me, about the things that he has just said now, that this platform of gathering is a learning space for all. I then remembered that at the few sessions I've attended, the breadth and depth of the discussions on various leadership topics have been amazing. I therefore approach today's session with the optimism that the panelists and the attendees will enrich my contribution. As the adage goes, I quote, it looks like I have some assistance.
Yeah, please, colleagues, and I ask that we mute. Prof, kindly proceed. Apologies for that.
No, it's fine. As I was saying that as the adage goes, I quote, the room is always smarter than any one individual, close quote. So I'm happy to be surrounded by so many leaders who are here to co-learn with us. So thank you very much. If I was in a political gathering, I will say all protocol observed. But let me continue. The basic structure of my presentation will have three parts: storytelling, leadership, and storytelling leadership. In other words, the two concepts separately and how I see them actually working together. I maintain that storytelling is not new. It's as old as humankind. Perhaps its articulation as a leadership tool has not been with us for many decades. It is, however, interesting that as early as 1994, Steve Jobs, who was at the time CEO of Pixar, was quoted as saying, quote, The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation that is to come. Close quote. Yeah, a further explanation of this phenomenal power is given by Gert Scholz in 2016, who in an article entitled The Neuroscience of Story, it has written there, quote, narrative imagining, in brackets story, is the fundamental instrument of thought. Rational capacities depend on it. It is our chief means of looking into the future, of predicting, of planning, and of explaining. Most of our experience, knowledge, and our thinking is organized as stories, close quote. In fact, he further says that listening to tales, quote, listening to tales becomes a rehearsal for events that may occur in our lives and a means of making sense of that which has already happened to us, close quote. I must say that my earliest recollection of a story that really shook me to the core was the one that we read, I think it was in grade 2 or grade 3. People who did not go to the former Model C schools, like me, will remember the series that was called Masambisane. In that book, there was a story that really touched me and worried me, even though I was very young at the time. It was a story about a man who was praised by the community or by everyone in the village because he was a hard worker. His maize fields were always well looked after, and his house was always clean. The villagers noticed this, and the man was the talk of the village. Another man, I think in the book, because it was a fictitious story, I think in the book it was depicted as a male baboon or something like that. But I'll say for the purposes of this discussion, another man became jealous and wanted to be praised as well. The second man got up early one day and started pushing a big log or tree trunk up the hill near the footpath so that he could be seen by everyone. When he reached the top of the hill, he pushed it down the hill again. He did this a number of times, but none of the villagers praised him. Late in the afternoon, he retired to his house very sad and confused. I was also upset, as a child, because I thought the villagers were unfair. Here's a man who was working, but nobody said a word about it. When I went home and my mother asked me what I had learned at school, I related the story and expressed my feelings about the unfair villagers. My mother gave the story a different perspective. And I learned that every hard work must have a purpose. If it doesn't, it is not worth praising. This has been a big influence in how I see life. Sometimes, just to show you how even today it still influences me, sometimes when I see a young graduate who is unemployable and not able to create work, the first thought that crosses my mind is that somebody made this child to push a log up and down the hill with no purpose. Because in the end of all the hard work, there's no outcome, there's no praise. So that is the first story that really touched me and made me think about life, as it has been said, that the impact of stories is that. So stories are powerful. They manage to engage us holistically, that is emotionally and mentally. Stories have always helped us to make sense of life. Unfortunately, fake stories, especially on social media, tend to have similar powers, which is quite unfortunate. In African tradition, singing the praises of a king or repeating war cries is nothing but telling stories of the king's victories or conquests, which help engender trust in the king as the leader with the requisite characteristics. You know, if you know, I mean, if you are Zulu or you have read about King Shaka, you know, he's got very inspiring phrases when they say, what is it tells you of a brave leader, of a very sharp leader mentally and otherwise. It's not only in Zulu tradition. A colleague of mine was telling that Mshweshwe also got the name Mshweshwe because of some heroic deeds. You know, after he had gone to initiation school, he was very brave and once organized a raid against some other leader who was called Ramona Heng. I may not be pronouncing it well, and I apologize to my Sotho-speaking friends. And they say Mshweshwe captured several heads there. And as was the tradition, he composed a poem praising himself. And he called himself, he referred to himself as a razor that had shaved all of Ramona Heng's beard. So Mshweshwe comes from there. He said, Kimushweshwe, Kimushweshwe Moshashwaila, which means I'm Shweshwe the shaver. And he went on just describing himself. So even the name is depicting a story or an event that he went through that he feels that is going to be part of his life. So the meaning behind the name has the power to shape the character. Even most of us have got names that have stories behind them. If you ask people why they are called Lindiwe, Ntomzodwa, and so on, there are stories always behind our names. So similarly, in the religious background, as Dr. Pett said earlier, I'm a Christian, so I'm not an authority in the Bible, but I'm familiar with the Bible. You know, stories in the Bible, most of the time, especially those that were told by Jesus, are called parables. And he used some of them to explain some concepts that were not very clear to his followers. For instance, when asked about the kingdom of heaven, he told a story. And he said, he talked about a treasure hidden in a field, and the man found it and went and bought the field. So maybe the lesson there is that when you find something that you treasure, you find it and you secure it. But anyway, it's the power of story. Many religions are full of stories. Many religions are full of stories, and many pastors and religious leaders, when they drive a point home, they use story. Okay. Now, before we look at how storytelling becomes an effective tool for leaders, we should also review leadership itself. You know, leadership, I believe, is one of the most written about topics in the world, especially in the world of business. And in fact, not business only, because even in education, everywhere, leadership is very important. And it has, I know that there is a librarian, a chief librarian amongst us. If you were to ask her, in most libraries, when you go to the section with leadership books, you find lots and lots of books. So just for the benefit of this discussion, I'll use a few definitions, not saying that those are authoritative or something. In fact, one of them is from our friend Wikipedia, which says, I quote, leadership, both as a research area and as a practical skill, encompasses the ability of an individual, group, or organization to lead, influence, or guide other individuals, teams, or entire organizations, close quote. I know that sometimes we use leadership casually. Many people will call each other leadership, and nobody really looks into what are the leadership characteristics that have have made somebody being, to be called leadership, but some even use it as a replacement of my friend. But many decades ago, Prentice in 1961, when I think the proliferation of many leadership studies started around about that time, but even as early as that, he defined leadership as, quote, the accomplishment of a goal through the direction of human assistance. So a successful leader is seen as one who understands people's motivation and enlists employee participation in a way that marries individual needs and interests to the group's purpose. Other popular assertions about leadership, which initially I didn't really take seriously. Some people say leadership deals with change and management deals with complexity. And some people say leadership is not a position, it happens at all levels. But from my own experience during COVID, I almost saw the thinking around seeing leadership as dealing with change and management with complexity. At our organization, when we were about to, or rather when there was lockdown, there was a team of managers that was fully occupied with challenges like who's going to be able to work from home, who needs a dongle, who needs this, and so they were actually concerned about the complexity that had been brought about by COVID. Whilst at a slightly higher level than that, in the executive level, the main concern was about how does this change the environment we're in? How does this change the way we're going to be delivering what we're supposed to be delivering going forward? Not the immediate complexity of will people have connectivity at home, how many people can work at home, and all of that. Those are very important. But for the survival of the organization, it's even more important to know what is the change that, or rather, what is the direction that this change is pulling us to? Are we prepared for it? What do we need to do to be prepared for it? Not just for next week as to who will be able to work from 8 to 5, but as to will we be able to operate in 5 years' time? So those are the bigger challenges that I've since realized that they are a reality when you are a leader. As we say, of course, leadership is not a position. So even those managers that were dealing with the complexities, I'm not claiming that they are not leaders. They are leaders at their levels as well. And also many leadership styles have been identified. And you can read some books will tell you there are 10, some will say there are 6, some they will say there are 8. And phrases like transformative leadership, or delegative leadership, or transactional leadership, or authoritative leadership, or participative leadership, all of those are styles of leadership which are a reality in many organizations. The point is, as a leadership tool, storytelling, as I see it, is not exclusive to just one or two types of leaders. It doesn't mean that you can only use it if you are a delegative leader or a transformative leader. I see it as a tool that is useful for all types of leaders. Another interesting exposition of leadership is one that I found in a very interesting book by Lewis and Malmgren in 2019, entitled The Leadership Lab, Understanding Leadership in the 21st Century. Now, this brings another dimension that as we move into the 21st century, there are things that were considered as strengths under traditional leadership, but which cannot serve us well in the 21st century. You know that most of the time when people talk of the 21st century, they look at IT and technology and so on, but there's also what we refer to as the 21st century soft skills. And some of those apply to leadership. In this book, I think they make a table which contrasts this type of leadership, I mean, traditional and 21st century. And some of the things that they say is that, you know, in the traditional space, leaders maximize strategy, but 21st century leaders maximize culture. I think that shouldn't be a surprise, because we remember when Prof spoke about strategy last year, he quoted Peter Drucker saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Some other things that they talk about here, they say traditional leaders apply more logic, but 21st century leaders apply more imagination. In other words, people who have done some studies that talk about left and right side of the brain, logic belongs to one side, but you have to have logic as well as imagination and other ways of thinking. And traditional leaders plan for either or, whilst 21st century leaders plan for both or many scenarios. They plan for uncertainty and ambiguity. There is no certainty. And most of the time, traditional leaders wanted big and bigger. Success was shown by, you know, if you're running a chain of stores, the bigger you get, the more successful people think you are. But 21st century leaders just emphasize more better than bigger. Your operations must be better. Bigger size can follow, but the goal is to make everything function well. It must be better, not only for products, but for customers, for clients, for employees, for everybody. Traditional leaders wielded authority, but 21st century leaders empathize more. Authority is centralized on the one side, on the other side, it's distributed. So
just interject if you don't mind.
Yeah,
you've got exactly 25 minutes left. I'm sure you can plan from there.
Yeah. Or left?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll use only 15.
Thanks a lot, lovely.
Okay, thanks. Okay, then if we come to storytelling now and leadership, why there's even a concept called storytelling leadership. I think the first point I would like to make is that a story that is told artfully and in a context relevant manner will, one, get the attention of the listener, because the listener sees herself or himself in the story. And it also arouses the emotions, and it encourages buy-in of whoever is listening. So as a leader, if you want to have buy-in, you have to have a context-relevant story, a story that will arouse the emotions, where people are going to see themselves in that story. Telling a story is not just about a logical sequencing of events. Telling a story is like, you know, I'm sure most of us have experienced hearing Trevor Noah tell a joke and everybody, a big audience laughs, and you try and relate that to your colleagues at work and people look at you. It's all in the art of how you told it. And if you don't tell a story, it can be a good story, but if you don't really use it properly, it doesn't have the impact that it's supposed to have. Secondly, the impact of the story is in the meaning, not so much in the detail. You know, I was talking about war cries, for instance, in the Zulu wars, especially during King Shaka. There is a war cry that is even used by one of the soccer clubs now. But if you don't know the history of what Shaka did to revolutionize the war at that time, you do not understand it, because it starts with somebody shouting "Babe ngapi," and somebody says, I mean, other people say "Babe ngapa," Tina saying "ngapa." In other words, we were on this side and they were on this side. And he repeats that, but then all of a sudden, everybody shouts "Kiligiti." And that's the end of the war cry. And it captures everything that, you know, before Shaka introduced the short spear, people would stand on this side and others would stand on this side and throw spears, and it will take long and so on. But when he introduced a new strategy of fighting, people were this side, the others were this side, but in a few seconds or in a second, Kiligiti means people who were actually lying down dead. Because we are shouting this thing, it means we were not the ones who did. They were on the side expecting us to throw spears, but all of a sudden we were there. And that's the impact of a war cry that summarizes the whole strategy and the outcome and the effectiveness of it in just 3 lines. Sometimes we believe that if we have our story will be clear. But story, you know, data, I attended a session where results, metric results were given. You know, my feeling is that if, for instance, I represent a school, parents, and and I want to tell them about how our metric students did. It's good to have graphs, it's good to have, but it should all be tied to a story. In other words, you should be saying, and also your message should be clear as to what you want to say to these parents. Maybe you want to drive home the point that, you know, all the extra programs that we introduced that some of you didn't understand have made us improve by 6 or 7%. So in those figures, you have beautiful graphs, you have everything, but have a message that you want to put across that, yes, we thank you for working with us to produce such results, but deep down you know that you are also selling the programs or the interventions that need their further support to actually say this thing works. So the impact of the story, as I say, is not so much in the detail, but it's in the meaning that you bring out of it and what you as a leader, you want to achieve. And also, a very short story can tell a lot in a powerful way. You know, I was listening to Oprah one day, instead of saying, you know, Mr. Mandela is a very humble man and so on, she told the story and said, you know, I worked for months trying to get an interview with Madiba, and I finally succeeded after, I don't know whether it was 5 or 6 months. And it shocked her when they were walking to the studio. And Madiba looked at her and said, Oprah, you didn't tell me what the topic of our discussion is going to be. And that so impressed Oprah that, you know, this man is a sought after interviewee. Everybody wants to speak to him, but he doesn't assume that the discussion we're going to have is going to be about him. You know, some people who are not humble, I mean, it tells you a lot about the humility of the person in that very short story. Yeah, also, you should know that a large percentage of our human communication is done with stories. And a good storytelling leader, I think Dr. Pett mentioned this earlier, a good storytelling leader must also be a good listener of stories, because the people you lead also have got stories to tell. And if you are not attentive to them, you become the main or whose stories are the only ones that count. I was talking, because I'm a sports lover, I had a discussion with a friend of mine, and I was telling him my belief. I was saying, because I was old enough when Kaizer Chiefs was formed, I think that if Orlando Pirates leaders at the time were good listeners, maybe we wouldn't have Kaizer Chiefs. And he said, why are you saying that? I said, no, because when Kaizer went overseas, he came back a celebrity, and he had stories to tell, and everybody wanted to see him, how he played, how he has improved, what his experiences were. And he suggested, or rather he sought permission from Pirates to form a team to go play in different places and so on against some top sides in different provinces. And my argument is that, at the time when he suggested that, Pirates threatened to throw him out of the team. And the only person who could listen was Iwat Nene, who was in management, and he was thrown out with Kaizer. So they started the progress. In my view, if the leadership at the time were good listeners, they could have put all that program and modified it a bit, but under the Pirates umbrella, and Chiefs would have been a giant within Pirates and so on. But I'm not saying it was a bad idea to form Kaizer. It did a lot of good for the South African football scene, but I'm just saying where I understand how things happened. And also, storytelling leaders know which stories to use to inspire and when to use them. Maybe to an outsider, it may look a bit odd. Dr. Pett, I would like to share a very short clip of a video. So I don't know if it's possible to play it.
Yes,
can I
you may
be
proceed.
to?
Yeah, you are permitted.
It says host disabled. Prof. It says host disabled.
Maji, please allow him to share. Maji?
Okay, because there's a shortage of time, if you allow me, I'll try and describe it. But it's
all right.
It would be very impactful.
Okay, you may proceed now. I think Maji is giving.
Okay.
Come in, Maji. To be able to share. Okay, can you share now?
Yeah, it says.
Okay, Prof, you may proceed.
No, when I click share screen, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. But anyway, it's no train smash. It doesn't allow me. It says the host has disabled it.
All right, please.
Okay, now I can share. Okay.
All right, thanks a lot. Lovely.
Okay, now I can share. Thank you. Okay, can you see that? It's not the whole presentation that I want to share, but wow. Okay, can you see that? Can you see my screen?
Perfect, Prof. Perfect.
Okay, here's Rulani here, and it will be interrupted somewhere in the middle and continue, but it's not longer than a minute.
It doesn't have audio, Prof. Is it by
Excuse me?
design? It does not have audio. Is it by
Oh,
design?
it doesn't.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I can hear it, but if you can't hear it, then it's pointless.
All right. No, we're betting. I can't hear
Okay.
it as well.
Anyway, what that clip says, Rolani in a soccer match, it's the start of extra time, I think, and he wants to motivate his players to play, and he brings in the story of Hector Peterson. And the commentator says, I've never heard this being done with, Hector Peterson being invoked in a soccer game. And whether you agree with him in what he's saying, but the attention that he's getting from his players, maybe it's not the first time he's telling them about this. Everything he says, if you want to be honored, you don't turn your back. I know the going is tough now, but you have to go forward. If you turn your back, you'll be like those rioters who were never honored like Peterson because they actually ran away and so on and so on. Whether this is a truthful capturing of it, but it seems to be working with his players. He's using a story here to say, guys, let's push on. I know it's tough. We have played 90 minutes. We've still got another 30 minutes to play. So story can be used even in places where you do not expect it. And maybe the last point in terms of where storytelling can be used is on, when you are onboarding staff, getting new staff, and you want to enhance their loyalty. At Mankosa, we are fortunate to have had a very inspirational founder, and most of the time we talk to our new staff, to our students. Every opportunity we get, we talk about why he started Mankosa. And when you are here and you want to fulfill that dream, you must understand why he started this institution. And then there's also a school in Durban, which is called Ohlange High School. Many years ago, when Mr. S. Dingobo was the principal, every year they had a week called Mafuguzela Week, because every student had to know the history, had to know the history of the school, how it was founded, who founded it, and actually feel inspired to be part of the school. So many a time, I think we can be very fruitful if we use stories to actually make people understand where they are and to be committed to the cause that the organization is trying to fulfill. In fact, at Mankosa, we even changed our graduation song and had a song that is talking about, it's in Zulu and English, and also talks about Prof. Karodia, also congratulates the students for their success and so on. So we wanted to bring something home, tell the story during the height of celebration. Again, that shapes the culture of the organization. And as I said, it's strategy for breakfast. So if the culture is wrong, strategy won't work. Now, storytelling as a tool, there's always a risk that good tools can be abused. Stories are sometimes used for the wrong reasons. Stories can be told without an ethical intent, or rather to undermine some progressive change. It would be easy for me to form stories that will show a tradition or a history of women who had minimized roles in society, and use that to justify positions that try to stop progress. We know also in our schooling that stories were told. There was a narrative that was told that in some part of Africa, especially the southern part, that Africans and Europeans, it's a narrative that was very dominant. And even when you say the sentence and say Africans and Europeans arrived in Africa at the same time, it just doesn't make sense. But people can do those things because stories are powerful. Stories are powerful. They shape our thinking and so on. If you are in power and you want to abuse your power, there is always that risk that you can actually use stories or twist the meaning of stories to push your agenda. In conclusion, Dr. Pett, I'm trying to imitate President Thabo Mbeki here. President Thabo Mbeki said, "I'm an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and that define the face of our native land." Close quote. I'm also saying, I too am an African. I owe my being and my understanding of life to the stories I've heard while sitting on my mother's or my father's lap, stories that I've heard from my teachers, my friends, stories that I've read in books and newspapers, stories that I've seen in movies and plays, and stories I've been a part of to inspire and uplift me. I find it hard to imagine a leader who has no story to tell in order to encourage, mentor, and inspire those around him. There is a quote that I want to read because you also mentioned about the state of our country and so on. Alan Rickman said, quote, "It's a human need to be told stories. Idiots and have no control over our destinies. The more we need to tell stories to each other about who we are, why we are, where we come from, and what might be the possible." Close quote. Alan Rickman. Thank you, friends.
Thank you so much, Prof. That was very profound. And colleagues, because of load shedding, what I'm going to do, I'm going to shorten the program such that we can finish at 1800. And I do note that from coming back, others going on to load shedding. So at 1800 we'll finish. So Prof, thanks a lot. I just want now to go to our panelists. And I want to start off with Mr. Ntshangase. Peggy Ntshangase, I'm now giving you guys as panelists an opportunity to ask questions, make some comments to what the Prof has said. So Peggy Ntshangase, briefly and be succinct, what is your comment or questions? Come in, switch on your camera and then unmute as well. Over to you, Mkazi.
Thank you, Chair. I have no questions, but just a comment. You know, I just want to get my video right. Can you hear me, Chair? But I can't hear you.
You may proceed,
Yes.
now, Mr. Ntshangase.
Thank you, Prof, for such a good presentation. What a topic. It's actually the reality is that we are here to experience, and I have this understanding that human beings are here, it's God experiencing himself through them. So we see experiences every day, and we communicate those experiences. The process of communicating the experiences, we get to know each other. You will only know you're a good comedian if you stand in front of the audience and audience are giving you the feedback. So in other words, in the process of storytelling, telling, you get to know yourself. I think that is very, very, very fundamental. I think I like the way Prof actually mixed this so well with leadership. We develop leadership concept, and at the end of the day, it becomes a concept purely because it produced the desired results. Obviously, the reality is that we also spoil it in a way because we bring in this thing called duality, where we say there's leadership that is bad, there's leadership that is good. Whereas in reality, if you look at all leadership, there is a leadership that is required at a specific time. I was very, very impressed at which the Prof actually bring those things together. It's a very, very, very good topic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Peggy, for being succinct and straight to the point. Let me bring in Hlengiwe. Hlengiwe, please come in, have your say on the issues of the day. Thanks, Hlengiwe.
Thank you, Dr. Pat, for giving me this opportunity. And I'd also like to thank Professor Ntombela for the presentation. I also like the structure of the presentation and on studying about what is storytelling and also leadership and the link between the two. The comment, I like the story of Masambisane. It's one of the books also that I read when we were young at school, and how it influenced him in terms of how he still take decision or how he, at the moment. So that's what I really take with me from this presentation. And also when he was talking about leadership in terms of the 21st century that focus on the culture, and emphasizing that because mostly when we look at the leadership, it was more about develop the strategy, but organizations have developed strategies, but organizations are still failing. And you look at what really makes organizations to fail, it's mostly the culture, how things are done. If leaders can communicate how things were done when organizations were effective, it will be much better. There are a lot of stories that leaders have, but they don't communicate them so that they can influence the culture. So I liked that story, and I like that part. And also, I would also like to, the part that I also interested me, it's about the storyteller, because there is power in the storyteller. Because the person that is telling the story can, for you to, for others to trust you, it depends on the character of the person that is telling the story. Firstly, people, they see when you care. People buy your story when the way you share your story, you want to, maybe like, for example, you want them to buy into an idea or it's very important who is sharing it. Are you vulnerable enough? Are you relating to them, the people that you are sharing with them? So when he was talking about the areas that are important in the story, like the context is very important. Your audience, you must know who's your audience. How, and when he was also sharing about the metric, you come with all the facts, the data. The data is it's something that is so much on these days. People present graphs and what is it really working for the parents? Because you just want to tell them what worked, what made their learners to pass, their young people, so that for that following year, they can invest on the interventions that you are selling to them. Or are you selling the story of how did you improve your metric results? So those are the things that I've taken with me, but I will say the storytelling and leadership, I think it's powerful. It's what is lacking. Even in our country, there are a lot of stories that are not told. For example, I always say there are a lot of stories that we can tell about NSFAS. If NSFAS was not there, our young people, the situation, who are still living in poverty, many of them could have never had degrees. But the story is not told. The story of SASA. I saw when SASA was introduced in our country, I saw the change. You could differentiate the child of a person that is working and the child of the person that is not working. You can't now. All of them, they have nice clothes for Christmas and all that. But there are so many stories of leadership that has been, or things that have been implemented by government, but they are not told. I think if we can emphasize the storytelling leadership, South Africa will be different. We can really even change the perception We know ESCOM is not working. We know other things, but there are so many things that are working, but stories are not told. So that's what I'm taking with me. Thank you, Dr. Pat.
Thank you so much, Sister Lenyo. I love that. Let's go to Nokwe the poet. Nokwe, please, what is your say on the issues of the day? Nokwe, please come in.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if you guys can see me.
Perfect, we can see you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mazibuko and Professor Ntombela. I really enjoyed the presentation that we had today from our professor. I think what I take away today is basically the tips that he gave us about the fact that a good storyteller has to be a good listener. And I think our chairperson, Bob Mazibuko, spoke on that, and that storytelling, a good storytelling leader needs to know what type of story to use and when to use them. The other things that I noted down was that story that he told us about Oprah Winfrey speaking about Nelson Mandela. And instead of her basically telling people just how humble he was as an individual, she decided to tell a story. And I believe that that story that she told people held, more weight as opposed to her just basically stipulating that he was a humble man. I'm really glad that I was part of this presentation, because I think it really was an eye-opener for me, and it really got me thinking. I think in the course of the week, I was really just thinking about storytelling and what it means to be, good storytelling leader. I actually realized that, probably the most highest paid people across the world are people that are really great storytellers. The likes of Trevor Noah, your Kevin Hart's, are people that are selling arenas with thousands of people coming to watch them basically tell stories. And so the question that I have for our professor today, and even for our chairperson and any other person that would like to answer the question, is are good storytellers born or are they made? And so if the answer is that they are made, and the belief is that we can all become good storytellers or good leaders that can tell better stories, what are some of the practical ways in which we can become good storytellers? I think the professor did touch on certain tips that he gave us on how we can tell engaging stories. I think one of the things he said was the fact that, telling a good story is not about the actual details, are not as actually narrating, the message behind the story. So not necessarily the details of the story. But the question that I have is, can we all become good storytellers? And if so, what are the practical steps that one can take in order to engage their audience a bit better, in order to engage the people that they're leading a bit better, so that they can be able to drive whatever message that they can drive across? I've met a lot of people that are really good that are very good at storytelling, but I've also met a lot of people that have told stories, and at the end of whichever story that individual tells, a lot of the times maybe we are unable to derive as to what the message was behind the story that they told. And so for people that perhaps are not the best at being really good storytellers, what are the practices those individuals can take to become good storytellers? I got the tips from the professor, but what can you do practically? Is it something that you can practice? Do you have to get mentorship so you can become a good storyteller? Does it have to do with reading good books? How do we become better at telling a story and ensuring that it's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, it has a meaning, and it has the impact that you intended for it to have?
Thank you, Noah Temba. Thanks a lot. I want to go to Mtetheleli Mgobozi. After Mte, then I'll go back to the professor to comment. Nte, please come in, have your say on the issues of the day.
Thank you, Dr. Pett. Can you see me?
Yes, I can. Thanks. You may proceed.
Okay, thanks.
I think I can see your finger as well. And so please remove your finger so you can see.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can see you. Thanks a lot. You may proceed, Mahlobo.
Okay, thank you. Greetings to the colleagues on the call. And thank you very much to Prof. Dombela for such a powerful presentation. Indeed, it was not boring. I loved everything about it. What I took on the presentation, number one was when he was talking about the traditional leadership versus the 21st century leadership, how leadership of this age, they don't just look at growth in terms of numbers, but they look at things being done in a better way. And they also not concentrating maybe on profits or gains, but they are looking at the whole organization, looking at the customers, looking at the operations itself, everything that is involved in actually running the organization. So I took that. I think it's profound, and I do believe that as an organization with different departments, if everyone can work in betterment of where they are, I think as an organization, we will be telling a better story to our customers. That was one. Also, the example of a principal who is addressing, the parents, because I think it's very important to know your audience. Who are your audience? Because if you know your audience, even your terminology, you will try and come closer to the audience using the story so that they can understand. Because you will find a leader in a strategic position, maybe is addressing members of the lower level, and they are telling the story, but the terminology that is being used makes it difficult for those people to grasp what was being said. So it's very important to analyze the audience, know who you are going to address with your story, so that it then becomes relevant to them. The last point I would like to make is when he made an example that even in the Bible, Jesus was telling stories, telling lots of parables. Then the last point I think he spoke about was abuse of storytelling, whereby maybe someone who's in authority can tell a story, maybe to hide some information to others while giving that information to the other group. Jesus, he actually did that because his disciples will ask him, why you always use parables? And then he will say, so that those people, the Pharisees and all that, would not understand. And then he will then after explain to them what actually he was meaning. He was using his storytelling, putting a point across, but he was very clear to tell a story that he knows very well that a certain group will not catch it deliberately from where he was standing. So I also take that, and just to add on that, on the abuse, maybe is that storytelling may mislead in some way, because you know, when you tell a story, your audience or the people that you are telling a story to, especially in an organization, it may seem like what they are expected to do is easy, you know, because a story will make things seem easier, which is good, will motivate, but when the actual work is being done now, you will find that it is not as easy as it was narrated in a story. So it's very important, again, to make sure that the message or that you want to send across, you do send this across, but then there should be some evaluation after the story to say, did it go across? Are the people doing exactly as it was, as the story was intending, was as the story's intent to do that? Yeah, I think I will stop there, Dr. Pett. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mahlobo. Prof, it would seem to me that you were able to touch the hearts and the minds of your panelists, but it's kind of unfair because I'm now moving from one Mahlobo to another Mahlobo. Prof, kindly respond and to the comments made, and also try and address one or two questions that have been raised. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Prof.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot for those comments. You know, I mean, I expected this. As I'm listening to the comments, I'm getting new insights and so on, which is very, people take things and look at them from different perspectives, which is good. And thank you also for the compliments. But one interesting question was, I think, from Nomatemba, was are storytellers, are storytellers born or made? I'll give a very biased view, because I'm an educator. If you are an educator, you are an optimist. You believe, or if you are an optimist, you sort of believe that you can take people from a certain level to another level. But it also depends on them. You know, even if you believe that you can teach somebody, but you cannot do the learning for them. I would think that storytelling is so much part of us as we grow up, as we meet other people, and it's a skill that can be developed. I know that there are, in every skill, people would say, hey, he's a born this, you know, because we differ in how quickly we take on skills. But I think with practice, it can be done. And yeah, and some of the things that were mentioned by Umashobo, like ukati terminology, and also to evaluate afterwards, did people understand what I was trying to say? You know, somebody spoke of a comedian, I also spoke of a comedian. A comedian gets immediate feedback, because if people just look at you, it means they are not getting what you're saying. But lastly, on this point, I want to be a bit maybe controversial in saying, most of the time we tamper with our natural storytelling abilities by being careful to preserve a certain view of ourselves. We want to, because we identify so much with certain things, we sort of can't talk much about them and try to please. You know, people always say that we've got a divided ANC, but we've got a divided society. You are not as free as you think you are. When you get into a group of strangers, you first have to really find out, will I be offending somebody if I do this? Will I be, which is okay, but it also limits our freedom to tell stories about our experiences in a very honest way. But the tip I can give you, if you hear an interesting story and see if they find it as interesting, discuss it, you'll get practice. I just discovered recently that, in fact, my colleague was telling me that every time you speak, we hear so many stories, but maybe it comes with age. It's because I've come across so many things that are worth talking about. But the other comments, I think, are just really on point. What the other colleagues have said, terminology, evaluating, understanding your audience, etc. All of those things are important. But as we say in most things, practice makes perfect. Tell your story.
Thank you, Prof. Shall we move on and then bring in Sibongile Dongabe? Have your say on the issues of the JCC. Be succinct as well.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, colleagues. Afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Prof. This was profound, and when I was invited about like storytelling, leadership, how does it connect? But today I've learned a lot. That yes, I as a librarian, I know very well that when you do storytelling, you have to be transparent. I've been a judge of storytellers, and we always look at a lot of skills that a storyteller should have, like your oral, your audio, how you tell a story, your actions, and so forth. But today, I also learned that you also have to have a trust. You trust that these people that are telling a story, they're actually listening to your story, which is also as an essential skill for a leader. So then I also learned that you also, as the same skill that you need to have as a storyteller, is to be confident. So a storyteller needs to be confident as well as a leader, because you cannot lead if you are not confident at all. So, Professor, thank you so much for sharing an insightful presentation, and also link it to our own creativity. Because as Africans, we tend to look down on our creativity, because storytelling is what we were born with. We used to be told stories like in around the fire. For those of us who are in the classic world, senior people, like older people, will be telling stories, and some of those stories were very like what to call educational, because some of them you even remember them now, you even recall them now. But nowadays, you hardly get those people that can tell us stories. So in that way, the stories are actually carrying a lot, which is why we need to also do oral storytelling, also do, write our stories so that we can leave a legacy. Because, as I said, it used to be told via the fire, around the fire. Now it's no longer that. So now we need to read more books so that we can our kids can learn those stories that we have written about us, or about them, or about the world that we're coming from. So to also also add to Sheniwa's question, I can safely say storytellers are not born. You can, as Professor has said, you can develop the skills as you go along, meeting with other people. Like, for instance, for me personally, I was born a very shy person, but today I can talk until the sun comes out. So you can, as much as when you read more books and when you interact and when you realize that world needs to lead people, and when you lead, you lead in any particular position, whether you are in church, in your house, in your car while you're driving, you are leading. Whatever you do, all of us are leading. And when you lead, you cannot just lead without being a storyteller, because whether you are saying, few words or like one word, that is also a quality of being a storyteller. So thank you so much, Prof and Doc. I really appreciate for being part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sibongile. I want to bring in Lungile Mdletshe. Please come in, have your say on the issues of the day. Be succinct as well. Lungile.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, leaders.
Good afternoon.
Thanks, Doctor. Thank you so much, Prof. Network has been playing games with me today, but nevertheless, I think I really appreciate the fact that I finally managed to listen what the Prof has had to share with us. I remember everything that I remember till this day that I was told when I was young. It's because of the emotion that came with the story. So I can safely say that the power is in the storyteller. And I can say that some of the storytellers are born and some are made, depending on what do you want to unleash in yourself, because the art comes with the storytelling. Also, what I can say that it's easier to keep something in mind if it has touched some emotion part in you, and you can easily also transfer to the others. And I remember every time my sister will say things, we say every time when you talk, ufagi no rocks. And it means she was born with that, because ever since she was young, she's been always like that. When she tells you something, even now, she's a very good salesperson. Whatever she says, you safely listen, and you never forget what she says. And for me, as my other leader has just mentioned, I was not born like that, but I had to try by all means to teach myself, equip myself with those skills. But what I can also pick up what the Prof mentioned there, which is very dangerous, when you know that you're a good storyteller and you take advantage of that and misuse that tool and use it to your advantage and your benefits without the benefits of others, it's a very dangerous thing. So I believe that even the listeners themselves, they must be also equipped enough to listen and be able to so that you can be able to take what is really relevant and what can help you. And also what touched me is when he emphasized the point that wherever you are, it's very good as a leader to understand the reason why that organization, why that company was formed, so that you can be able to get the buy-in when you tell your stories and make sure that everything that you tell is relevant to the vision of the organization, because without that, we will be lost. Thank you so much, Doctor, and thank you so much, Prof. And
thank you so much, Lungi. Thanks a lot. In the interest of time, shall we move? Let me bring in Zamekile. Zamekile, please come in and be succinct.
Thank you, Dr. Mazibuko. Greetings to all my colleagues. And I thank you for such a great opportunity to share our great ideas with giants like you. That's why they say if you want to be successful, you have to climb on the shoulders of the giants. And I thank you, Prof. Ntombela, for such a touching story. What I've learned in this story is the first story that you spoke about, that every hard work must have a purpose, no matter how hard you work. But if you don't have a purpose on what you are doing, never expect people to clap hands for you. And I remember what was said by the late Dr. Miles Monroe, I quote, he said, in our country, we do not lack leaders, but we lack character in our leaders. So that is what is important, because every sphere is having leaders. But if you observe those leaders, they do not have character. So there is another story that I remembered while I'm listening, the story of a man who had two sons. It says this man was a drunkard. Then he passed away, and his two sons, one became a drunkard, and the other one wanted nothing to do with alcohol. But both of them, when they are asked, why you are drinking like this, he would say, I used to see my father drinking. And the other one, when he's asked, why you are not drinking, he used to say, I used to see my father not drinking, so I decided not to drink. And the other one saw his father drinking, but he decided to drink as his father. So I remembered a quote by Jim Rohn, which says each person must live their life as a model for the others. So as leaders, we need to live life so that our lives should be models to other people. And he also said a good objective of a leadership is to help those who are doing poorly to do well, and to help those who are doing well to do more well. So I thank you so much, and thank you to the panelists. I've heard the comments, especially by Mr. Mkopozi. He said we leaders should observe the way they are addressing people, the way they are telling their stories. And I remembered what was said by Steve Kompela. He said, when I speak, I use two brains, the thinking brain and the brain monitoring the thinking brain. I think that's what we lack on our leaders whenever addressing stories, to think and monitor what we are saying. By the way, I thank you so much. That's all I can say. Thank you, Dr. Pett.
Thank you so much, Zamegile. Really some good comments. Let's go to Tembile. Tembile, please come in and be succinct. We've got about 32 minutes left. Tembile.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm not quite sure if you can hear me because I'm on the side of the road because I'm heading.
All right, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay, let me try. I'm in the car, so I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be clear.
All right. No, it's fine. Thanks a lot, CTC.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Pett, for the opportunity, and thanks, Professor Ntombela. It was a really thought-provoking presentation, and it really made me think and actually bring home that storytelling leadership, it's something that has always been with us, but we have not yet pinpointed it as a type of leadership. And what I'm thinking is that when you were talking about the first thing is the humbleness. When we are telling our stories, like when leaders are telling their stories, there is a very gray line between the humbleness and ego taking over when you are telling your story, persuading your followers to do a specific task. But and then also what I thought that storytelling leadership, it works in different ways. At work, more especially as teachers, that is what we do as teachers to try and persuade our learners to perform better. And then we use it the same leadership style when we are raising our kids at home, because when your child misbehaves, and the way that you are going to try and bring your child back is to tell the story of how you grew up, and maybe somebody how the person overcame whatever that the child is struggling with. And then another way where storytelling that I've seen while you were talking that it's applicable is even in the church. Most of the time we've got these services that we have, and the pastors and different ministries are ministering in the church. But there is something that some leaders in the church do. They bring in the session of Fagaza. And I take that session of Fagaza as another storytelling way that we persuade or bring hope to the hopeless within the church. But the question that I what you were talking about in Menkosa, that you said you have Africanized, and that is something that has been with me, like at the back of my mind for so long, to say, if we are really trying to Africanize education and moving away from the Eurocentric approach of education and bring it home for our kids, why are we not celebrating graduation the African way? And I think that's a bold step that has been taken by Menkosa, because there is a different way that we can tell stories. And then my question is, how can we catalyze this transformation in the higher education sector especially, for us to push more to Africanizing education and decolonizing education, other than to just have this Eurocentric or the Western approach to education that sometimes doesn't talk to our students. And then that's the first question. And then another, what are the disadvantages of storytelling? Because when you're looking at what television, you see SABC1 advertising their dramas. They would say that it's our stories told channel where there are these telenovelas that are playing. But there is so much that's in the mass media that is actually there that actually brings out negative things in this story telling, but it brings some things that are negative, and actually the societies are persuaded to doing those things. If you think of some of the things that were like a taboo previously, just I wish for you, Prof, to touch on the disadvantages of storytelling leadership, and how can we guard against, especially within this 21st century, where our kids are exposed to so much data and so much stories out there, and then how can we guard ourselves as the nation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stembile. Prof, I'm not going to allow you to comment right now. A number of people have told me that they are going on load shedding at 1800. I will, however, give you time at about 10 to, between yourself and one of our panelists who's going to do the vote of thanks. You will have 7 minutes. He will have 3 minutes to do vote of thanks. But for now, I want to shift the gears, and this is how I'm shifting the gears. I want to go to Zine and ask you a question, Zine, and say, is storytelling coming of age, or is it still relevant in this day and age? And just give us a view briefly. Why do you believe that storytelling is still far away from basically reaching its sell-by date? Zine, please come in. Colleagues, in the interest of time, I cannot find Zine, but let me just go and take that question directly to Dr. Ngongwane. Dr. Ngongwane, do you believe that storytelling is still relevant? And do you believe that it is still far from reaching its sell-by date? Or will it ever reach its sell-by date? Or let's talk about storytelling evolution. Just be briefed. Dr. Ngongwane?
Sure. Yeah, it needs a long answer though. I will switch on my video later on.
Okay, thanks.
Let me say this, yeah. There is an incept that was moving around on the net. Ne? When they sent the Europeans to check Africans, they found that we were united, we had stories, we had culture, and we had religion and many other things. And then they said on the basis of that, and we had also indigenous knowledge, on the basis of that, they cannot actually conquer us. So what was taken from us were the stories. Plato used to say, those who tell stories rule society. So our grandmothers were the major storytellers in the home. And the whole indigenous knowledge was based on storytelling. When you are saying it has come of age or what, look at the campaigns, Obama's, former President Obama's campaigns. They were all won through storytelling. So if you look also what we are struggling with in terms of our education, the quality and so on, if we can bring back the storytelling, we read, like he has said, Masambisane and Igoda, and we still remember those stories, and we are not struggling. And if you look at the issues or moral issues that we are trying to impart from the stories that we have as folklores, as on TV, on whatever, you have seen what is happening now. They are doing the same thing of stealing our stories. They take one European story and they interpret it to all our radio stations, Nalibala. And then that is not African. No matter how you translate, it is the meaning of the story. We were able to put like stories into proverbs, into sayings, into adages to teach and to inform people. But now it's not happening. So we're thinking this is the 21st century tool. No, it has been there forever. Let me just quote you something that Mandela said on the 20th of the 4th month in 1964, the Rivonia trial. And then he said, in my youth, in the Transkei, I listened to the elders of my tribe telling stories of the old days. Among the tales they related to me were those of wars fought by our ancestors in defense of the fatherland. The names of Dingane and Bambata, Hintsa and Makana, Squinty and Dalasile, Mshweshwe and Skukune were praised as the glory of the entire African nation. And then he ends, he says, this is what has motivated me in all that I have done in relation to the charges made against me in these cases. Let me stop there in the interest of time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sipho Ngongwane. I want to move on now to Motsako. Motsako, I want you to tell us what is the role of storytelling in cultural development, social development, and also politics? What is the role of storytelling in those spheres? Motsako? Motsako, are you still there? Yeah, I can see that you're trying to unmute. Please talk to us, Motsako. We are struggling. We can't even hear a word, ma'am. Come back to Motsako because I want to come back to Motsako with the very same question, but I want to go to Peggy Ntshangase right now before I go back to Motsako again. Peggy Ntshangase, I know that you're one of the corporate executives that are on the platform. I want you to tell us what would be and what is the role of storytelling for mentoring and coaching, or in mentoring and coaching, and also as you are working for an organization that you work for like ESCOM, what is the role of storytelling with regard to succession planning and business continuity management? Peggy Ntshangase?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Yes. As long as we all experience things, I mean, a human being is experiencing. So as we experience, we have a story to tell. So anything that is understood better is when we relate our stories. So everyone has got something to say. Now, any organization that have made very, very good strides, they always have people who can tell good stories about the organization itself. So, I mean, no doubt, if you were to listen to people who have been mentored very well, tell you about the stories that told by the mentors. So the reality is that will never change. You will only grow through storytelling purely because every day there is a story to tell. People are just born storytellers. It's in us, it's built in human brain.
Thank you, Peggy. Let me go back to Motsako. Motsako, please come in. I want you to talk to us about storytelling in cultural development, leadership development, and societal development. Please come in, ma'am.
Can you hear me right now before I move my...
No, perfect. Please switch on your, perfect, there you go.
Oh, okay, how are you? Hi, everybody. My name is Mutsoka Modawu. Thank you, Dr. Pat Mazibuko. And I just would like to just say thank you also to our main speaker. I just wanted to just first of all, you know, answering this question is quite a broad one. I had made some few notes for myself. I'll try and align them in answering your question. I think leadership when it comes to culture, because understanding where you're coming from and your roots, it's something that you can't fake it. If you don't know where you come from, if you don't understand from the core of where you came from. I mean, I will quote the book that I read before by Rick Warren, What on Earth Am I Here For? I actually have it right in front of me. What is the purpose? It's called The Purpose Driven for Life. So that for me kind of answers the whole entire spec of that question, because if I, Mutsaka, don't understand, if there's somebody else doesn't understand who they are, where they came from, what were the roots while they were in their mother's womb? What is that story that my mother was telling me while I was in her womb? That is quite very important. And then when it comes to the leadership in the corporate space, while I was in the corporate space, what was important is that from day one, they take you on something called an induction, of course. That's where they get to tell you about the company. Who are we? What's our culture? Because you need to understand when you sign that job contract or whatever document that you had to sign to say, yes, I'm going to work here. What does it mean? What is the culture in the environment? My boss or my leader, what do they like? So for me, I like to zoom in personally onto a person first, but people are very different. So it's not so easy to go and say, hey, manager, hey, Mr. Ehud, let's go for coffee, because I want to get to know you. You interviewed me, I got the job, but can we grab coffee? Because if I understand who I'm reporting to and what do they like, it's quite easy to do your job. And I'm quite the opposite of a leader. I connect, I stay very close. I hang out with people, I go out with them, you know, because I want to understand people who are that report to me, people that are peers, colleagues, whatever level. I want to get to know what do you like before we start talking about projects, because a project is just a function, you know, it's something we have to do, then we pack it. But you never really know. I mean, if I had to explain certain people that I've met in the last 3 months, it's like God has moved in a supernatural speed, if I quote my husband. And then when it comes to development and politics, the political space is still something that I cannot too much. I've got support on that. So I would love if it's possible for me not to say much, but what I've observed as an observer is that I think we need to have some sort of data that is defined, and we use it as a template to make decisions. I mean, I'm part of it as much as I'm not into politics. However, I'll give an example. Right now with the load shedding, I'll use that as an example. Because question is, okay, there's load shedding at this time. For me, I ask the question, but how are we solving it? Who's responsible for it? If it's a political game, because I don't know anything about politics in terms of zooming in onto it, right? But it does affect me. When my son says, Mommy, what is load shedding? I need to be able to explain what is it, what does it mean? However, Mommy, we never have lights off. No, it's because Mommy has a backup. I have a solution for myself, but what about the me before I had this solution? What about where I come from? What about that child that is sitting with a candle? By the way, studying with candle is the best, because for me, it's like romantic, you know? And yeah, I think in a nutshell, I'll summarize it like that. But just if Dr. Pett, you allow me, I made some notes here that I just wanted to quickly add on. Obviously, they've already said a lot about what the main speaker said. So I'll just add on to say, it's not always about you. You must zoom in to your surrounding people. It can be anybody, mother, child, leader, it doesn't matter. You as a leader, because everybody is kind of like a leader. I mean, when you wake up and you take a breath, you decide if you want to brush your teeth, right? So that is a leadership decision that you take. Nobody has to force you. If you don't brush your teeth, that means you failed on a task yourself. And how do you manage that? I mean, you have to make it test. Because for me, it's about, I see my that are now, I'm just at a level where I think, come on now, like you need to take yourself seriously, because if you can't take yourself seriously, I fall between the millennium, and I think I'm going to be crossing over to the other side very soon. So I understand that when someone says, I love Amapiano, and please, can we have Amapiano at church? And I understand the traditional side, because I made my notes here. I don't want to hop, because I'm told I hop around when I speak. I can't find my diagram, but basically what I mean is, if someone comes to me and say, hey, you know, you are kind of like a Mama Ruti, but we don't see you so much in the church doing so and so and so, and I'm like, I know. but what is the thing? And then they're like, but we would love you to become like a youth leader. I'm like, what, me? Why? I'm using myself as a third person because I can only reference to my story right now. And also from what I read on that book of Rick Warren, what on earth am I here for? Because I read a few things, I had to decode myself, you know. So I would say, in a nutshell, just to summarize, that we need to start paying. It starts with you. If you can't pay attention to yourself, you'll never pay attention to your spouse, your children, your leader. By the time you get to the office, come that coffee break, you're already out because you didn't make your decision when you woke up. And all it covers, whatever faith that it may be, you need to make sure that you first brush your teeth. I mean, as a mother, that's what I start with my kids. And I forget to brush my teeth because I have to rush and quickly brush their teeth. And my son will say, but mommy, you didn't brush your teeth. You're telling me to brush your teeth. So what am I saying is that it all starts with me. If I can do it, you can do it. Everybody in there, we make a difference. And obviously we bring solution. I would like to recommend, there's a training that I facilitated a while back. It's called data. What is it called again? Sorry, I wrote my notes. I'm kind of going too fast because of time. It's by Lassa. It's by a company called Lassa. I believe Dr. Pett will share the details there. I would recommend for everyone to go and do it without saying too much. It kind of helps you to decode yourself, and you can take that principle and apply it in everything you do. And it will be so lovely to one day see it being used as a tool and a solution to bring decisions. I mean, Usis Kleng, you were mentioning something about if you don't understand where you're going. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what she said. That's how I understood it. You will never, ever make a decision. I mean, in a way, I was like, oh, now she kind of summarized everything I wanted to say. But in a nutshell, that's my response. And I hope it covered everything. If not, there will be another platform for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Masuka. Let me just bring in the last panelist. Sis Kleng, you spoke of an era of data. That being said, what is the role of storytelling in the data era? Just be succinct, Kleng. Just a minute and a half.
Okay. The storytelling in the era of data. Earlier, when I was speaking, I referred to government, like I'm looking at government. There's so much that is done by government, but I still believe the story is not told. That there is negative perception because they are not telling the story. In the era of data, I believe that the story of telling will be more powerful because people now, they don't have time. They just want to look at a certain clip and just see what's really happening. So if you can use, we can use storytelling using digital information, using pictures, telling the story. So we can tell story better because people understand better when they see something and having that short clip. So storytelling still plays a big role in the era of data. So you can influence people more, you can convince them. Remember, when you talk storytelling, you want them to buy in. It's better when they see something, then they can buy in. So I believe that storytelling is still powerful in the era of data. So I also still emphasize that we all have a story to tell. There was a question whether are you made or what? We all have a story to tell. When you are 60 old, you have a story that you can tell to influence them to be a better woman that you are at 16 years old. So all of us, we have a story to tell. What I can just say, maybe this is my last opportunity, and say, all of us, let's go out there and tell our story. We can make a difference, especially in our working environment, since we are talking about storytelling in the leadership environment. You can tell people the story, but most of the time when you tell the story, you must tell your story where you struggle so that people can see that when there is a problem, there is always a solution at the end. But most of us, we don't want to be. So if you want to use storytelling to influence people, you must know you must be vulnerable so people to trust you, so that you get the buy-in, you get the impact that you want, you influence the culture. You find that we have nice strategies, we have all these things that we have developed, but we can't influence people to implement it. Let's tell our stories. How did we make it? So I will say digital platform, just like what we are doing now. We are telling our stories, we are sharing stories using the digital platform. So it's still in the data environment, it's still very Even earlier when we were talking about the matric results, sometimes presenting matric results in graphs and also in a data format, it works for others. Those who were good in mathematics as parents and all that, they will enjoy those graphs who are showing that 83%, 48%, this is the area where we need improvement. So data still plays a role, but I will say when you use data and also sharing a story together, you will the buy-in, you will be able to influence your audience, you will get much better information, but much better response using the data. I believe, Dr. Pat, data will still play a key role in storytelling. But I also want something else, the social media.
Half a minute,
Okay, half a minute. Let me talk about social media. Social media, it's a platform where people are telling their stories. Sometimes the stories that they are telling, there was also a speaker earlier who was like, showing that she's worried about how social media is influencing our children. So I believe that it's time for people with good stories to use social media. Most of the time you find that us who are aging now, we don't tell the stories. We let young people use social media, which is so influential, it's used, it's widely used, they tell the stories. All the people, you have a story to tell, go to social media, let's tell good stories. If you look at the news, every time the news is a bad story, it's time for us to share good stories. Thank you, and lead our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Shengiwe. And Prof. Mashabo, can I ask you to come in, respond succinctly as we prepare to close, and then I'll then go to Dr. Sipho to do the defense. And Prof. Mashabo, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Pat. A lot has been said. It's so thick. I mean, it's really good. I thank the colleagues for their contributions. It's very difficult to be detailed in everything that they've talked about. I want to first tackle the issue of decolonized education. That's a very topical issue. There are a lot of bright minds that are tackling it. My penny's worth of contribution is that, you know, decolonizing education doesn't mean that everything that is Western is bad or everything that is traditional is good. You know, there's something that they call acculturation. One point, the important thing is that we shouldn't devalue our own and see it as worthless. For me, one starting point or one thing that really set us back as Africans is that European knowledge is very reductionist. That's why we compartmentalize everything into topics. You deal with this, whilst our knowledge, our lives is holistic. We do not have a separate spiritual thing, a separate physical thing, a separate, you deal with things, we connect dots. I think the education that we are having really fails us when it comes to connecting things that are related. We are just specialists in our own field, and we want to be specialists in our own field, and we are happy if it's recognized by the societies in Harvard and everything. But our priority is not what it does for our communities here. So I'm not saying that everything that the colonists brought was bad, but I'm just saying we shouldn't devalue what is ours. We should try and use it as a stepping stone, because we have to know who we are. And then secondly, I was having another thought about people who are saying, what if you are not able to tell stories and so on? And I remember, one day, the most fruitful conversations with kids in the car, because we happened to be listening to a song by Rainbow that say, I think it was saying, "We are Hambudoli" or something like that. And I asked them, do you understand this story? And when they listened to it again, it gave me a platform that I would never have known how to approach to talk about the issues of kids who leave home and all of that. And sometimes you can use other people's stories to your benefit and learn from them and so on. And I like Shengiwe's comment about, I mean, it links to, you should know your audience. You can use graphs, it's important and so on. I remembered a friend who said, taxi owners know their audience. You never hear them saying taxi fares are going up by 15%. They will just tell you exactly that it's going up by R1 on this route, it's going up by R2. You know their audience. It would be nice to have it in graphs and tell people, but if people are not going to understand, then you are not telling a story that is really meaningful to your audience. Thank you for all the comments that have been made. I've really learned a lot, even from Spongile. I wish I could have conversations. I mean, I never thought about people who would judge or evaluate storytellers, you know, and so it's a very specialized skill. Yeah, I think I'll end there, Dr. Pett, but the issue of decolonization is very topical in education, and I don't think one can deal with it in 3 minutes or 4 minutes, but it's very important. We should not brush it under the carpet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ntombela. You've done a pretty good job, but we've got Dr. Sipho Ngungwane to do a vote of thanks for us. Colleagues, please bear with us. Because of load shedding, I don't want to lose some of our colleagues, so that's why I've decided to make this just 2 hours for today. But let's not waste time. Dr. Sipho Ntombela, please come in. Sorry, Dr. Sipho Ngungwane.
Thank you, Doc. It has been such an honor to be a part of this TLG session, and a special thanks to our guest, Professor Meg Ntombela, for accepting the Leadership Game invitation and for being here virtually with us today. Your presentation, Prof, and your thoughts have truly inspired us, and we thank you very much. And also, sincere thanks to everyone who handled the event throughout in terms of technology and invitation, and a wide round of applause and thanks to all the participants who made the event to be such an informative and a memorable one. We have learned a lot from our names, surnames, clans. There are stories there, and we can also learn from other storytellers like Bugcina Hlophe. And I read somewhere that Princess Diana was taught to be a storyteller when she saw someone else, I think her former husband, telling a joke. And then she was sat down and taught how to tell a story, from including the self, starting from self to us, and then the story of now. And she became a very good storyteller. With those few words, thanks very much to all of you. We hope you will take this journey forward of storytelling. There are so many benefits. We are seeing standalone comedies gaining a lot from storytelling. We're seeing writers gaining a lot, and so on. The content that we have can really change what we are experiencing in South Africa. Thanks very much, Dr. Mazibuko, for putting this together, and we hope we are not going to stop. There is still a lot to tell. We have a story to tell. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Sipho Ngongwane, and I appreciate all the efforts. I know that you are enrolled. Thanks for all your effort. Colleagues, go to Facebook. Let us start talking. Then my very last comment is that the next TLG session is on the 25th of February. The theme that we'll be discussing will be unlearning, relearning, and co-learning leadership. I think, colleagues, it is important that as we lead one another, as we embark on the journey of learning together, we stop and say, look, what is it that we need to stop and basically decouple from? What is it that we need to take forward? What is something that we need to basically start looking at? Therefore, the issue of unlearning certain things that have been embedded to us, relearning, and also co-learning together. That being said, may I thank you, each and every one of you, and wish you well. And right at this time, shall we stand down, and I wish you well. Thanks. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.